This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
The government has said, oh, don't worry, it's not spyware. And it's troubling because these are incredibly powerful tools that have access to that personal information. And then also, so I'll direct that question to Mr. Pryor, but I'll ask my second one as well, which will go to Ms. Carr, and that is surrounding the it's a government device, therefore you basically have no rights, and that's a paraphrase of even questions that we heard from a parliamentary secretary in the last hour. I think you were here for that. So I'd like to ask your opinion on that, and if you can provide some context as to why in your opening statements you referred to it as those things, and then I have a couple of more questions that I'd like to get to. We'll start with Mr. Pryor.
Sure, thank you for the question. I would say whether we call it a spyware by definition, we could argue over the definition, it is technology that is infringing on our members' privacy rights. And I think that's the basic line that was crossed here. The proactive disclosure of the use of this technology, even though Treasury Board directives state that should have happened, did not happen. We learned about it after the fact. And just to speak to the issue of whether a government device is able to suspend, the fact that it is a government device is able to suspend all the members' privacy rights as such. The federal government is one of the biggest employers in this country. It needs to be setting a high bar and a high example for how we expect all employers to behave towards all Canadian citizens and their privacy rights as such. And we feel that in this case, and in many other cases it seems that we're learning about slowly, basic policy wasn't followed. The Privacy Commissioner was very clear that when new tools are developed that pose the privacy risks, as we've seen here, that merits a privacy impact assessment and proactive disclosure. I think there's very easy ways to communicate proactive disclosure of these technologies in plain language that will make workers in a workplace, our members, federal public servants, much more able not just to abide by basic standards of what is to be shared on a government device, but to be aware of their privacy rights and the potential violations of them, so that discussion can happen before these technologies are installed.
I hate to cut you off, but it's as you know, we've limited time, and you may have heard my not so subtle advice to department heads and whatnot. Say, pick up the phone, call the Privacy Commissioner. Better needs to be done so that we can start to restore that trust, both with Canadians, but also the hardworking men and women in our public service. So Ms. Carr, and I'm
precise.
Okay,
this is Nate's first appearance, so I've been on this rodeo train before. So
I do apologize.
You may not know that there is already a policy on using digital devices. That in that policy it says that you can actually use the government devices for personal use if it does not interfere with your work. It is done on your own time. So I'm not sure that was brought up before by anyone else. These policies, there are lots of policy suites that exist within the government sphere, but as we leave them to be decentralized and applied by individual departments instead of centralized through Treasury Board and oversight, that's where we get into trouble.
No, and I appreciate that, and I think it's an important, especially because cell phones, mobile devices have become such powerful communications tools. No longer is it just a cell phone or just an email device. It's so much more than that. So I am curious if I could hear your opinion first, and if you can offer any examples of if these investigative tools have been used to find whistleblowers or people that have been targeted because of their actions within a particular department. So specifically in terms of finding a whistleblower, I'm wondering if there's any examples, if you've heard that or could cite them. But I'd also just ask for your opinion about how this could infringe on a worker's ability to call out what could be misconduct within their department, agency, or otherwise.
I'll go first. One of the things that concerns me about some of the testimony is that they say they have the software, but they don't use it. They send it off to another department. Mm-hmm. If the technology exists and we don't know how it's being used, and they don't have to disclose when and how it's being used, that is very concerning. I can't point to a specific example, but having technology and not having any kind of disclosure on when you need to use it, any director or DG signing off, that again is very concerning. No oversight means it can be used without us knowing.
Yeah, and And Mr. Pryor, was there anything you wanted to add to that? There's about a minute left here.
No, I just wanted to say that I agree with Jennifer on the points that she made, but also the employer has a strong track record here of being reactive instead of proactive when it comes to digital policy and privacy. And so a lot of Treasury Board policies are in desperate need of updating for the digital world and need to be probably constantly refreshed as we go. But I think the policy framework that we have is strong enough. It just needs to be followed more closely.
I appreciate that, and the proactive versus reactive. That's the message I think that the government departments would behoove them to follow. So when it comes to the use of these tools and the idea of consent with employees, we heard in testimony from the last hour about the power imbalance. Could you provide just brief context?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because of the when these policies were put in place, what is the consent? I don't think that when the original policy, when it was just your cell phone, they would have access to who you called, how long you did. But they haven't done it when we're using these tools for things like cloud-based. These tools will allow you to go into those clouds. They will allow you to go into encrypted, password protected. They have all your history. So that was not contemplated way back. We need to have the updated policies. I hope that you can agree that anyone, the unlimited potential for them to use this tool to find anything is it's absurd that we would think that they don't know privacy.
Thank you. We'll play Pong on our Commodore 64. So we no, I have Apple Music, $14.95 a month. I know that. Mr. Green, 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And I'm just happy to be able to report that I downloaded the first Wu-Tang album on Napster 20 plus years ago. And now they're doing retirement tours, reunion tours. It's a bit of the Wild West.
Yeah, it's a bit of the Wild West in terms of consistency of the application of policies, except when it's convenient for the other way around.
Have there been any grievances?
So we don't know of any grievances, but in order for us to file a grievance, we have to know that the act is taking place.
Correct. Would a lack of grievance be a permission for them to breach the Privacy Act?
Absolutely not. Again, you can't grieve something if you don't know what's happening. The minute that you understand that's happening, you can make a grievance. But if you don't know what's happening, you can't protect your rights.
Mr. Pierre?
A grievance could be something that could move the needle a little bit, I would say, on this, and we're looking at ways to enforce our members' rights in this case. But the case is that the policies exist and should have enforcement rights built in at that management level.
Should we review the Privacy Act?
100%.
What would you like to see in it?
Again, the guidelines that I had for the Privacy Act were that the guidelines be clear around what, when and how new modified requirements need a new privacy assessment and when current ones need to be updated. And we also need to make sure that it is enforced that these software tools are being assessed before being used, and that all less invasive methods be considered beforehand.
Tools are being used to look into government policy violations such as fraud or workplace harassment. So shouldn't the government have the right to look into these serious violations?
Yeah, so if they're using these tools in the way that they're supposed to or that what they're intended and under and up to the data privacy assessment has been done, we need to make sure that at least of the three departments, they said they have used them without doing the prior assessment. So we need to make sure that the assessments are being done as they're intended.
Earlier this week, the Auditor General, as you know, released a bombshell report exposing incompetence and corruption within the CBSA. And I think the most glaring problem with this report is how the government, despite its promise in 2015 to reduce the size of the use of external consultants and rely upon the professional public service. And we know that over the years, he's increased the size of the public service by close to 40%. How do you feel as union leaders, and how does the membership feel knowing that GC Strategies, a two-person firm working out of their basement with no IT experience, simply connecting government with IT professionals, how does your membership feel about that egregious abuse of the expertise that your membership holds?
So I'm going to take that because I represent the IT workers, and I'll say we are livid. I would love to come back to this committee. There's lots that I could talk about with regards to this whole contracting out. I had a member come to me yesterday this week and said, I can't even get a pencil and a notebook without two people, signing off on authority. How can something balloon so big?
Wow.
So I would love the opportunity to come back. I didn't prepare for that testimony today, but I would love to come back and talk to you.
You've got 3.5 minutes. Can you elaborate some more?
So,
I'd love to hear more. More.
Okay. So contracting out has been a preoccupation of the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. We represent professionals, engineers, nurses, doctors, all regulated professionals who take their work very seriously on behalf of Canadians. To watch things be contracted out, it leads to higher costs to the government. It was 40% higher in the report, less transparency, less accountability, lower quality of service, and most importantly for me is the loss of institutional knowledge because it is done out of house. That means that we have to consistently be interdependent on contractors to even correct mistakes that they have made. So we need to make sure that we invest in the public service so that they can maintain and deliver the services, reliable services on which Canadians depend and expect.
Thank you very much. And given the future expansion of our work here at Ethics, I'm sure that we're going to see you again, Ms. Carr. So thank you for that. Over to you, Mr. Pryor and Ms. Shantz. Same type of question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, this was an egregious violation of procurement policies, an egregious violation of a lot of different ways in which contracting out has kind of bloated what people generally read as the public sector. Right? Public servants actually do not make up the entirety of the public sector. A huge amount of that is shady relationships with contractors that are sometimes needed, of course. And I'm speaking here as a policy analyst and as the president of a union that represents a lot of policy analysts. Even in that specialized world of policy development, contracting out is normal. There's databases we don't have access to. There are fields of information that we just can't have access to. But this whole element of not being able to build the institutional memory to be able to carry out our tasks in a regular way is a consistent problem. And when people talk about the bloat of the public sector, for our members, it's these vast webs of contractor relationships that could probably be done far more cheaply and more effectively and in the spirit of building institutional memory and capacity in-house. And so we don't agree that the public sector is over bloated. We don't agree that the public sector requires a lot of trimming over the next 5 to 10 years. We do need this contractor relationship and this vast web of contractors to be severely reined in, however, because we feel that our members are qualified to do the type of work we do the best with the correct levels of oversight, and those are very stringent levels of oversight.
Thank you. Ms.
If I can
Shantz,
just
your
add
thoughts?
briefly, I'd just like to add briefly, we're here today to talk about privacy. And so the minute we start adding layers of contracting out, all of a sudden we have infinite points for data breaches. We've seen with BGRS moving. We've seen recently there was another one, I can't remember the name right now. And so we see that these things start to happen, that all of a sudden when we start contracting more and more, we open ourselves to more and more points of failure, more and more points of breach. And that needs to be thought about in a holistic way of how we can minimize security, because that's Canadians' personal data, public sector workers' personal data, and data that is important to our government from security perspectives. This is essential stuff. It's stuff that public sector workers are trained on, that they know how to do it, how to get it right. But when we contract that out, we start losing control. And that's something that we need to be thinking about as well.
So are there any points of interest or answers you'd like to provide this committee beyond your opening statement and beyond the questions that have been asked?
So again, I think, I come to these committees. I will actually be at the Defense Committee in 2 weeks talking about contracting out. I think the overall accountability and the decentralization of responsibilities to departments has created an environment where it's hard for me to tell my members what rights they have and how they're going to be applied, what policies are going to refer to them, and how to provide them guidance. So I really would like to say that, we all work for the federal government. We have one employer. However, we have, many, many different rules and regulations depending on where you work.